Growing up, I didn't have a good dad. He wasn't the worst, for sure. But when I think about it and I look back at my childhood, I can't name a single close friend that had a good dad. At best, we all had a dad that was like physically present in our lives, but nothing deeper. They were all either moody or distant or had issues, drinking, etc. None that I would classify as a good father figure, that's for sure. So that got me thinking, why is fatherhood so broken for so many generations of men these days? Now, like I say in all my videos, I'm not an expert. I'm just a guy with something on his mind. And today what's on my mind is why fatherhood is so broken and taking a look at, in my opinion, at two major factors that contribute to the issue that we're having: war and divorce. Let's talk about it. Now, to be fair, the topic of fatherhood is very complex, multi-layered, many nuances to it. And I just want to acknowledge, I'm not going to be able to touch on all of them in this video, okay? So first, let's talk about war and the multi-generational scar it has left on American men. Probably men all over the world, but I'm an American man, so I can only speak to our history. I don't think it would take you very long in your network to branch out before you know somebody who has been to war, or their father has been to war, or their grandfather has been to war. It won't take very long at all. Trust me. Try it. So think about the last 100 years of American history. World War I, World War II. Those two wars alone pulled entire generations of men away from their families for years at a time. Those men came back praised as heroes, but they all carried silent scars. Today we would call it PTSD. Back then, shell shock, thousand-yard stare, etc. But back then there was no language for it. There wasn't any support. People knew it was an issue, but they couldn't put their finger on what it was. It just was assumed that war is traumatic and that's just what happens. And it is. For those veterans, a lot of times they came back, their only way to cope was either to hit the bottle, bury themselves in work, or just push everything down and not talk about it. Neither of those are productive for raising children or setting an example for fatherhood. So now let's move forward. Korea, Vietnam, wars, conflicts, whatever you want to label it, it's all the same. Those may have been worse, specifically Vietnam, because when those men returned, society didn't know what to do with them and often did not support them in the same way culturally as the war heroes that returned from World War I and World War II. So their trauma was pushed down even further. Their silence was even louder. They really had no one to talk to. And that effect bled over into fatherhood. Those fathers were absent, emotionally distant, quick to anger, basically unavailable for all the needs that a child has when they're growing up. Then after that, the Gulf War. And after that, the War on Terror, which to date is the longest war in American history. 20 years of men being deployed overseas. Millions of fathers pulled away from their family on deployments, sometimes multiple times. Many of those men came back with traumatic brain injuries, missing limbs, PTSD, survivor's guilt. The list goes on and on. Even if their bodies were physically home, oftentimes their minds were not. And that list just goes to show all the issues that men had that survived the war. There's plenty of men that lost their lives and didn't come back to their kids at all. So for the ones that made it home, their bodies might have been physically present, but oftentimes their minds were not. And that shaped the way that they fathered. The war is horrific. We ask men to do insanely difficult things. We ask them to take lives, and sometimes in the most brutal fashion possible. But then we ask them to come back and tuck their kids in bed at night. Those two things are on the opposite ends of a spectrum. And it's not as easy as just flipping a switch. Watching their friends get blown up, watching their friends' brains splattered all over them, etc. It gets graphic, it gets dark, but that's reality for some people. And sometimes, literally, these traumatic events happened days before they're sent home, making that switch even harder to flip. How do you go from a killing machine to a loving father in 48 hours? That's probably an exaggeration, but you get my point. Here's the thing. War didn't just wound fathers emotionally and physically. It tore their families apart in another big way: divorce. During the War on Terror, researchers discovered that if a man was deployed overseas for a year or more at a time, his chance for divorce increased by 30% in some cases. And the striking part of that study discovered that 97% of the divorces were filed after the man returned home from war, not during. So that just goes to show you how deep the damage is and how broken these men are when they return. Think about it. Years away, missing milestones, their first steps, their first words, birthdays, even just something as simple as sitting down and having dinner with your child every night. Those men that were deployed missed out on. Then they come back from deployment, walk into their home, and they feel like a stranger. That kind of distance and disconnect doesn't just affect marriages, it affects fatherhood. It affects the bond between a father and his children. Bottom line, if men return from war broken, incomplete, unable to manage their emotions or show emotions, they're not going to be able to raise their children properly in order for them to become fully functional, full spectrum adults. Now, if they're raising boys, those boys grow up to exhibit the same patterns of behavior, and they're unable to do the same thing for their children, and the cycle continues. Now, I know there's exceptions to the rule, and I'm generalizing here to make a point, okay? I know that some veterans come back and they're just fine, and they're okay at raising children and all that stuff. I'm not talking about you. So if it doesn't apply, let it fly. But I am talking about generations of men who have seen this vicious cycle. Men return home broken, unable to be the father that they want their sons to grow up to be, and the cycle continues. So now let's move into talking about divorce and how that affects fatherhood. Divorce is common, and almost half of marriages nowadays end in divorce. But the way that custody works hits fathers especially hard. Around 75 to 80% of custodial parents are mothers. That means that most divorced dads only see their children on weekends, or sometimes every other weekend. At best, around 20 to 25% of the time total. And what does that do to fatherhood? Well, I'll tell you, it shrinks it. It reduces men to weekend parents. And when that happens, it strips away all of that day-to-day connection. Those little conversations every day. How was your day at school, etc. What did that bully say to you on the playground? You know, all of those conversations that are so important for a father to have with their child gets reduced to 16 hours of waking time on every weekend. That becomes very difficult to fit that all in there in such a short amount of time. No helping with homework, no bedtime routines, none of those small conversations that actually build connection and trust. Instead, dad becomes the fun parent or the absent parent. And then kids grow up with the message, maybe not spoken out loud, but felt. And that message is, dad is optional. And for fathers, that isn't just painful, it's identity shattering. Many report depression, loneliness, feeling like they lost their purpose. And for kids, it means growing up without consistent male presence, which is so important. And the truth is, kids don't see that absence and think, oh, the system pushed him away. Instead, they internalize that and they feel rejection. And that rejection can affect the rest of their life. So when we talk about fatherhood today and the problems with it, it's not just about men not stepping up. It's about generations of men that have been pulled away from their families either through war or divorce, often by systems and cultures that told them that they were secondary to the process. And by process, I mean the process of raising children, specifically raising sons to become men that are then capable of raising sons. And the results of this vicious cycle are generations of boys that grew up to be men that never really knew what it was like to have a fully present father figure in their life. And that means generations of men today that are trying to figure out how to be a father to their son when they never actually had a father figure to model after. Think about how hard it would be to put together one of those like 1,000-piece puzzles without actually having the box cover to look at to see what the puzzle's supposed to be. It's just this pile of pieces. And you're trying to figure it out. And well, what is this? Is this a horse? Is this a tree? Whatever, right? That box with the picture on it is your guide to let you know how to put these pieces together. Now, let's take it one step further. Let's take a handful of those pieces and chuck it off the table. You have no idea what those even are. Good luck putting that puzzle together. And again, I want to reiterate, I'm not blaming moms. I'm not blaming dads. I'm really just taking a look at history and trying to see what has shaped the fatherhood that we see today and why it feels so broken. Why was my dad not a good dad? Well, I'll tell you, my dad wasn't a good dad because his father went to war and came back all fucked up. So he didn't have that model to say, okay, this is how I spend time with my sons. This is how I should raise my sons, etc. He didn't have the box cover to the puzzle. Gone. So he acted a lot like his father did, but his father wasn't a good role model. So then I have struggled in my life to become the man that I want to be by pretty much just doing the opposite of whatever my father did. It affected me so much that that's one of the reasons, basically the main reason, why I chose not to have children, because I felt like I wasn't going to be a good dad, because I was afraid of becoming who my dad was, and I didn't want to do that, and I didn't want to raise broken children. Was that the right answer? I don't know, but it's what I'm going to have to live with. So if you're a dad today, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to show up consistently and as much as possible for your children. Do everything in your power to show your son who they should grow up to be, and your daughter who they should grow up to marry one day. Because a good man can be a role model for boys and girls. So men, I plead with you, we have to break this cycle. Please do everything in your power to be there for your children. So tell me, please comment below, did you have a good father? I know that no one is perfect, but if you didn't have a good father, I want you to play that game and see how many moves it takes to find a male in your lineage that went to war. And do you think that that affected them when they came back, therefore affecting your dad and therefore affecting you? Thank you so much for watching. If you got something out of this video, please give it a like and hit that subscribe button. And after that, check out one of these videos over here because I think it's right up your alley. Thank you very much. Appreciate you.